I don't care if you built this place, Malcolm snapped, finger jabbing the conference table like he was ordering fries. Legacy doesn't matter. Alignment does. That's what he said to Patricia in front of a dozen glass-eyed directors who used to defer to her like she was Moses descending from the mountaintop. Back when Voltrix Solutions still had a soul, before the son of the CEO swaggered in with his fresh haircut, overblown self-importance, a weekend's worth of strategic off-site jargon rattling around in his skull like a marble in a shot glass. She didn't say a word, just blinked. But inside she was filing every syllable into a mental folder labeled Malcolm's Dumbest Mandate. Let's rewind 72 hours. Monday morning, 7:52 a.m. Patricia logs in and sees her calendar look like it just got mugged. Weekly compliance check, gone. Product alignment call, gone. Ops sync, gone. The only thing that wasn't deleted was a recurring 30-minute wellness meditation with Malcolm. And if that doesn't scream corporate coup led by a toddler with a god complex, I don't know what does. 3 voicemails to the CFO, nothing. Slack, left on read. Her budget approvals for Q4, still pending. Funny how that didn't stop Malcolm from greenlighting a $90K UX redesign, led by someone whose entire LinkedIn bio was serial entrepreneur and sunset chaser. Look, before we go deeper into the slow-motion circus fire, I gotta pause for 1 second. Real quick, if you're listening to this and haven't subscribed yet, go ahead and hit that little button. Same with the like, it actually helps the team keep the lights on. It tells the algorithm we're not just yelling into a void. All right, back to the implosion. So by Tuesday, Patricia's got her answer. She's being boxed out. No pink slip. No thank you for your service fruit basket. Just quiet erasure, corporate gaslight style. Like she died and no one had the decency to write an obituary. Malcolm, meanwhile, is flouncing around the office in tailored slacks and a smirk, quoting Simon Sinek and saying things like agility begins with discomfort. He even added a new title to his email footer, Chief Innovation Architect, which is corporate for I make messes other people clean up. She watches from the periphery, watches as he starts scheduling closed-door meetings with the board, watches the HR lead, an old coworker of Patricia's who once cried on her shoulder after a merger, now avoiding eye contact like Patricia owed her child support. By Thursday, Malcolm holds a town hall where he unveils the new operating mandate. There's a slideshow, pie charts, buzzwords like synergy and forward scaffolding. It's a glorified PowerPoint striptease designed to sell the board on a restructuring plan that smells like nepotism marinated in startup cologne. Patricia's name isn't mentioned once. Her department, Customer Risk and Regulatory Oversight, is quietly folded into something called Operational Synergy Zone 2. No idea what that means, but it sounds like a nightclub with a dress code and a cover charge. When she tries to ask a question, Malcolm cuts her off with a smile so fake you could taste the Splenda. Let's not get stuck in legacy thinking, he says, as if legacy was a dirty word and not the reason the damn company still had a 5-star federal compliance rating. He goes home that night and opens a folder on her desktop called for later. Starts dragging in files, meeting logs, budget approvals, names, timestamps. She doesn't know yet what she'll do with it, but she knows how this game works. Because unlike Malcolm, Patricia remembers 2008. She remembers layoffs that came with no warning and compliance audits that could bankrupt a company faster than a PR scandal at a Super Bowl halftime show. She remembers one clause tucked deep in the old continuity plan, assumed continuity override. And now, thanks to Malcolm's mandate, she's pretty damn sure he accidentally stepped on it like a landmine. But she doesn't tell him. Not yet. The boardroom smelled like citrus cleaner and fear, the kind of scent cocktail you get when someone tries to cover rot with lemon zest. Malcolm stood at the front of the glass-walled cage, pacing like a substitute teacher who just learned PowerPoint over the weekend. His new operating mandate was up on the 98-inch monitor, complete with sliding hexagons, gradient charts, and inspirational phrases in all caps like "Trust the shakeup." Patricia sat near the far end, not at the table, no seat for her this time. She was positioned like furniture. Useful, but ignored. The invite said all senior stakeholders, but apparently, Malcolm's definition excluded the woman who once rebuilt the company's entire risk assessment protocol, using nothing but caffeine and vengeance during the Great Recall of 2011. "We need to think future forward," Malcolm said, doing that thing where he air-quoted his own damn words like he was quoting scripture. Legacy departments breed comfort. Comfort breeds stagnation. Our new structure rewards velocity, not tenure. Velocity. If replacing 17 years of documented compliance infrastructure with a color-coded Slack channel was progress. Patricia didn't interrupt. She just scribbled, bullet points, dates, who nodded, who stayed quiet. The VP of Finance picked at her cuticles. The CTO blinked like a broken Roomba. The head of HR, her former lunch buddy, smiled and nodded at the ceiling. The vote was called. Hands went up. Hesitation flickered, but not enough to stop it. 6 out of 11. It passed. Barely. But in corporate politics, a one-vote win might as well be a landslide if the CEO blesses it. And he did. The old man, silver hair looking thinner under the fluorescence, cleared his throat and said, "Sometimes it takes fresh blood to see what the rest of us have stopped noticing." Then he looked at Patricia, not with malice, not even with guilt. Just detachment, like a man trading in a Buick for a Tesla, and pretending he doesn't miss the old steering wheel. Her legacy division was gone in a sentence, folded into something called Core Experience, now under a guy who once misspelled compliance in a quarterly report and blamed autocorrect. She didn't flinch, didn't blink, just nodded once, like a boxer tasting the first jab of the round. She didn't come to the meeting unarmed. Her bag was a hard copy of the mandate draft she got from Legal's shared drive before her access mysteriously glitched. That night, she went home and built a spreadsheet that could prosecute a war. Tab 1, Meeting Attendees. Tab 2, Approval Routing Inconsistencies. Tab 3, Conflicts of Interest. Tab 4, Vendor Alignment Inconsistencies. And then a folder titled Redacted Versions Comparison, highlighting how Clause 7 mysteriously appeared between Draft 2 and Draft 3 with no approval log. She traced it all. One exec approved it after midnight using a generic admin account. Another replied approved by email from their vacation auto-reply in Cabo. Patricia knew better than to scream into the void. She just logged it all. She called in a favor with a junior analyst she once mentored out of a fraud accusation in 2016, gave her the timestamp log of the mandate's metadata. 2 names didn't match. One didn't even work in compliance. She didn't go to HR. HR now reported to Malcolm's people transformation lead, a woman whose previous job was running a crystal healing blog and coaching burnout workshops for burnt-out crypto bros. No, Patricia knew better. She watched as old systems were gutted. As checklists became trust-based workflows, sign-offs were replaced with emojis. At one point, a project lead emailed her, "Hey, just making sure it's cool if we skip the redundancy review since that's legacy now?" She didn't reply, just saved the email to her folder and tagged it incriminating stupidity. Week after week, she played possum, invisible, sidelined, watching as Malcolm floated around the office like he was the second coming of Jobs, only with worse posture and a god complex. Here's the thing about being underestimated. No one notices you collecting receipts. And Patricia had a war chest full of them. It was a Saturday night when Patricia found it. She wasn't on the clock. She wasn't being paid. She wasn't even technically supposed to have access to the document anymore. Malcolm's Office of Innovation had revoked her permissions 3 days after the board vote. She'd saved a draft copy to a personal flash drive the moment her calendar stopped syncing. Not for revenge, not out of spite, just instinct. Buried in the revised mandate, page 14, section 7, subsection B, was a phrase that didn't belong in corporate restructuring. Not in 2025, not in a healthy company. Assumed continuity override. Her breath didn't catch. Her heart didn't skip. Just stared at it like an old scar you forgot was still on your skin. She hadn't seen those words in over 15 years, not since 2008, when Voltrix nearly bled out during the tech downturn. Back then, she was a junior risk analyst, still wearing flats that made her feet blister and suits that fit like punishment. The override clause was part of an emergency playbook drafted during a 4-day crisis lockdown in a Marriott conference room, one of those barely ventilated corporate war rooms where people lived on energy drinks and resentment. The clause was never meant for use under normal conditions. It was a fail-dead circuit. If the company underwent structural changes without oversight council review, the system would trigger an automatic escalation, a flag to federal compliance, a freeze on discretionary accounts. a lockout of any system marked non-essential, supposed to be removed after the crisis ended. Filed, forgotten, obsolete. Yet here it was in a 2025 mandate, masquerading as some kind of proactive governance language. A landmine disguised as leadership. She opened her notes and pulled the original clause from the archived continuity plan. She still had a printed copy, with coffee stains and a page corner she chewed on during the final review. The phrasing matched exactly. Down to the damn comma. Here's what chilled her. Malcolm didn't write this. He couldn't have. She'd seen his drafts. He thought contingency was spelled with an S. She checked the document properties. Metadata showed 2 editors, Malcolm and C. Walker. Now that name rang a bell. Carl Walker, former compliance officer. Retired 5 years ago. Used to wear suspenders and chew pens like he was defusing bombs with his molars. He'd mentored Patricia early on, back when she still asked permission to push back in meetings. He was also the only person outside of legal and the executive suite who had a printed copy of the crisis playbook. She called him. He picked up on the 3rd ring, his voice gravelly like rust scraping across a coffee can. "Did you give Malcolm the continuity clause?" she asked, skipping hello. Long silence. "I sent him an old framework. Thought he wanted to learn," Carl said. "No, he'd cut and paste it into a live doc." Jesus. She closed her eyes and exhaled through her nose. This wasn't sabotage. This was stupidity wearing a leadership badge. Carl muttered that clause hasn't been tested since the IRS audit in '09. If it fires big. "Yeah," she replied. "I know." She hung up. This wasn't about her job anymore. This wasn't about Malcolm's ego or the CEO's cowardice or the cheap insult of being replaced by a LinkedIn influencer with a podcast. This was about a ticking time bomb wired into the company's guts by a man who didn't understand what he was copying. Patricia opened a new folder on her desktop. She labeled it Continuity Breach Legal. Inside went all 3 drafts of the mandate, metadata screenshots, archived continuity plan, comparison logs, internal emails referencing reorg velocity and risk redundancy descoping, vendor contracts that bypassed review channels. She color-coded it by risk level, labeled every file. She knew that if the clause triggered, the auditors wouldn't care about feelings. They'd care about sequence, timing, accountability. Patricia didn't plan to set the bomb off. She just planned to make sure everyone knew who armed it. The first one to go was Rita, VP of Vendor Relations, 23 years in. She wore orthopedic heels and carried a handbag full of Tums and paperclips. Rita once negotiated a $500,000 savings during the 2015 supply chain choke just by threatening to forward a single email to procurement. She didn't get a goodbye lunch. She got a 10-minute realignment discussion with Malcolm and a pre-signed NDA packet. Then came Javon from facilities, built the evacuation protocols from scratch after a gas leak almost barbecued half the East Wing. Replaced by someone Malcolm called a facilities visionaire who had 2 months of experience managing a yoga studio that sold protein muffins out of a closet. By the end of the week, 4 more were gone, all restructured. All walked out with badge access revoked and their inboxes scrubbed like crime scenes. Their replacements came in hot. Matching tote bags, buzzwords, unchecked confidence. One had a startup pitch deck as his LinkedIn banner. Another listed his most recent employer as myself. Patricia recognized one face immediately, Chase Brogan, aka DJ Chase Broski, who once spun EDM remixes of the Office theme at Malcolm's 30th birthday in Palm Springs. He now led IT integrity and data flow and had somehow already locked himself out of the admin portal twice. But the prize winner, a girl named Kyra with a rainbow manicure and a vape pen in her desk drawer. Her title, Culture Orchestrator. Her credentials, a podcast called Managing Your Vibe, Corporate Mindfulness in the Age of Slack. It was Kyra who greenlit Malcolm's idea to retheme the HR portal as the hub of human flourishment. When the link broke for all users over 40, she tweeted a meme about legacy systems being emotionally unavailable. The office changed, tone changed. Malcolm strutted like a rooster high on microdoses and self-approval. Every Monday he posted a selfie on the internal Slack with captions like "another week to disrupt the status quo." Patricia muted the channel after she threw up in her mouth a little. And then came the fire. One of the innovation hires, no one ever clarified who, accidentally deleted the entire Q3 product compliance directory. Not moved, not archived, deleted, gone. 3 years of process audits, training certifications, federal traceability logs. It was a quiet disaster. No announcements, no emails, just a quiet panic in IT, whispers in the compliance cube farm, and a tense fire drill meeting with Malcolm where he blamed data friction. Patricia didn't say a word. She went home, pulled out her old drive, dragged a zip file labeled Q3 PC Audit Archive Final 2 into the company server from her personal archive. No glory, no credit, just triage. The next day, she got a generic email from Malcolm's new chief data strategist. "Hey, noticed our problem kinda fixed itself. Love that. We'll note for innovation mapping." She didn't reply, just added the email to the patterns of incompetent subfolder. That Friday, he passed the CEO in the break room. He looked like a man halfway through a slow-motion heart attack. Tie crooked, eyes gray around the edges. He poured coffee into his mug, missed, and didn't notice. He saw her. Paused, still keeping an eye on things, he asked. She shrugged, force of habit. He nodded, looking down into the puddle on the counter like it held answers. He's trying. It's just hard to say no to him. Patricia wanted to scream. Instead, picked up a paper towel and wiped the counter. "I used to have to earn my nose," she said quietly. Every one of them came with a receipt. He didn't respond. She left the break room and walked past the wall of plaques, certificates, awards, that picture from 2010 where the Department of Energy handed Voltrix a federal compliance commendation signed by a senator. Her name was etched on the bottom corner. Now it was just decoration. She paused at her cubicle. New hires were gathered near the kitchenette, debating whether to start a company TikTok or a Twitch stream to showcase the culture. She closed her eyes, counted to 5, and went back to work, because someone in the building still gave a damn about keeping the lights on without burning the place down. They tried to keep it quiet, but you can't hide the smell of panic under corporate cologne. Mid-September, whispers started in the hallway outside legal. The quarterly board meeting had been rescheduled. Earlier, longer, and this time the external auditors would be joining in person. Not virtual, not a summary report. In the room, no one said why. No one needed to. A new federal compliance framework had rolled out that quarter, designed to clamp down on companies screwing around with structural mandates while funneling vendor money into innovation slush. Malcolm's new operating mandate. It practically danced naked in front of those regulations with a bottle of tequila and a megaphone. Patricia heard about the meeting from the facilities guy, not the new one with a man bun and a TikTok about feng shui fire exits. The real one, Miguel. He leaned over her cubicle and whispered. They booked the 9th floor war room for 6 hours. Name tags and everything. 6 hours. That wasn't a quarterly update. It was an audit in waiting. 2 hours later, Patricia received a formal email from People Operations informing her that attendance at the board meeting was limited to essential stakeholders directly aligned with the innovation mandate. She wasn't on the list. She didn't blink, didn't reply. She simply opened the original HR onboarding packet she kept in a locked drawer, the same packet she'd once helped design during a compliance overhaul. Section 3C, page 12, Continuity Officer Assignment Emergency Compliance Protocol. Her name was still listed. No expiration, no rescindment. Signed by the CEO himself back in 2018, after a near miss with a bad vendor integration cost the company a $300,000 penalty. Malcolm never revoked it. Hell, he probably didn't even know it existed. She scanned the page, annotated the margin, attached the PDF to an email addressed to the general legal inbox with no message. No subject, just the file. Let them open it. Let them feel the cold wind creep in. By Wednesday, she noticed the tremors. Malcolm's morning alignment coffee hour was canceled without explanation. The calendar placeholder for the board meeting quietly changed from Q3 vision alignment to mandate review external auditors present. She didn't smile. She did order a second coffee that morning, paid with her own card. A little private celebration. The day before the meeting, she printed hard copies of her folder, not the digital backups. Print, old school. She used tab dividers, bold headers, chronological order, cleaner than any brief a junior associate ever submitted to the SEC. There was no rage in it, just precision. A timeline of chaos, the unauthorized vendor onboarding, deleted directory incident, NDA template swaps, metadata trail showing clause insertions by non-compliance personnel, side-by-side comparison of the original crisis override and Malcolm's lifted version. She organized it all under one label, Trigger Cascade Assumed Continuity Event. That night, she sat at home, rereading the folder while her dog snored next to the couch. Outside, cicadas screamed into the dusk like they knew something was coming. He didn't rehearse, didn't plan a speech. She didn't need to, because systems speak for themselves when they fail loud enough. Let Malcolm bring his buzzwords. Let the board lean on loyalty and wishful thinking. Let the auditors ask polite questions and take silent notes. Patricia had no interest in applause. She wanted consequences. And this time, the consequences were already scheduled on the damn calendar. Malcolm walked into the boardroom like it was prom night, and he'd just been crowned king of disruption. Dark tailored suit, hair too perfect, smile oiled up and weaponized. Behind him, a cart rolled in with laminated handouts, color-coded graphs, and something labeled Phase Roman II Acceleration, the burn-forward strategy. The meeting had barely started when he launched into his monologue. Phase I cleared legacy clutter. Phase Roman II, he beamed, is where we scale, proposing a doubling of vendor investment across strategic silos and a full migration of compliance functions into our new CX Sync app suite, built in-house for optimized oversight without bureaucratic lag. He paused like he expected applause. Got none. The CTO blinked slowly. The CFO stared into his coffee like it was a crystal ball. And seated just past them, in his usual muted navy blazer, was the external auditor, Leonard Marsh, Phineas and Wakefield, a man whose facial expressions made granite look dramatic. Patricia had crossed paths with Leonard once before, during the 2013 review of vendor clawback protocols. He didn't raise his voice then either. He didn't have to. Now he was flipping through the printed mandate on the polished wood table like he was thumbing a hymnal at a funeral. Malcolm kept going. This re-centralization will remove layers of traditional friction. By bringing oversight into innovation, we unlock new trust vectors. Leonard cleared his throat. Excuse me, Mr. Roth. Malcolm froze mid-sentence. The room shifted. You could feel it like the /C kicked on and nobody moved. Leonard laid one wrinkled finger on the page. Section 7, subsection B. Malcolm squinted, confused. Yes, that's just a continuity buffer clause. Standard language. Leonard read aloud. Assumed continuity override activates upon mandate-based structural change without oversight council review. In such an event, all non-board discretionary spend is frozen pending audit determination. Central functions revert to last legally acknowledged continuity officer. Trigger cascade shall commence within 5 business days of clause activation. Silence. The CFO set down his pen. The HR lead blinked. CEO looked like he'd aged 4 years in 4 seconds. Then his eyes slowly moved across the table to his son. You put that clause in? The CEO asked. Malcolm swallowed. It was part of a framework. I thought it added robustness. Leonard didn't even look up. This clause was designed for bankruptcy triage or catastrophic internal sabotage. It is not standard language. In fact, the phrasing predates current governance protocols by at least 10 years. This isn't robustness. This is a kill switch. The CEO's voice dropped to something smaller than usual. Who told you to add that line? Malcolm looked up, blinking. What? The clause. Who gave it to you? I found it in some legacy material, from compliance. Carl Walker, maybe? It was just a suggestion, Dad. You said to make it look airtight. The CEO didn't respond, just leaned back, staring at the middle of the table like he was trying to remember the last time his son asked before doing. Then the auditor added, flatly, clause activation is retroactive to the effective date of the mandate. That landed like a hammer dropped into a swimming pool. The effective date? 6 weeks ago. Meaning the system, the company, was already in breach. Patricia was outside the room, not invited, not on the list, but she knew the exact moment the clause hit, because the Slack notifications went dead silent. And then legal's head of documentation messaged her, you should come upstairs. She stood, grabbed the folder, and walked toward the boardroom like someone who already knew the ending. The door opened like a plot twist. Patricia didn't knock, didn't hesitate, just stepped in with a folder under her arm and a look that said, you've had your fun. Now it's my turn. Half the board didn't recognize her at first, other half pretended not to. Only the CEO turned fully toward her, lips slightly parted, eyes searching her face like she might be a ghost. Leonard the auditor didn't flinch. He simply flipped a page in the mandate packet and asked the room, can anyone confirm the current holder of the continuity officer designation? No one spoke. He turned the page again, already knowing. Because according to the most recent notarized governance log, dated in 2018 and never superseded, the active continuity officer is still Patricia Hill. He looked up, dead center at Malcolm. You never revoked it. The color drained from Malcolm's face like someone pulled the plug. He reached for the bottle of water in front of him, missed the cap, and fumbled it into his lap. That can't be right, he muttered. We streamlined roles. Consolidated. Patricia walked up to the head of the table and laid down the folder like it was a legal obituary. No, you just renamed things, she said. Calm, controlled. You never closed my role, never filed a nullification form. And per Clause 7b, any structural shift that bypasses oversight without an updated continuity officer's signature defaults to the last recorded holder. She opened the folder. One flick of the tab. This, she said, is a record of what's happened since your mandate. She didn't raise her voice, didn't lean in, just let the facts speak, each page its own indictment. Tab 1, a list of all vendors onboarded since the restructure. 4 had no compliance verification. 2 shared a parent company. 1 had a history of financial misreporting in a previous federal contract. Tab 2, misused NDA templates. Old versions, expired clauses, signed by authorized personnel who had no authority to do so. Tab 3, bypassed review logs, dozens of them. Entries that went straight to final without second eyes. One particularly damning entry marked urgent approve for Malcolm, signed off by someone whose job title was culture evangelist. She stepped back. Let them read. Malcolm made a strangled sound in his throat, a cross between a cough and a panic hiccup. You're not even an innovation anymore. It was never removed from governance, she cut in. And you never read the parts of the charter that mattered. Leonard leaned forward, adjusted his glasses. To be clear, if the continuity officer was never officially terminated, then all governance-sensitive changes enacted since the mandate may be non-compliant. The room spun without spinning. The VP of Operations pushed back from the table. Wait, everything Malcolm authorized could be void, Leonard confirmed, pending further legal review. Silence. Patricia didn't gloat, didn't smirk. She just stood there, spine straight, watching grown men try to unspill a gallon of stupidity. Malcolm opened his mouth again, closed it, blinked like a man whose parachute had turned out to be a duffel bag. The CEO said nothing. He just stared at the folder, at the tabs, at the signature in the top right corner of that 2018 Continuity Officer form, his own, in blue ink. Real twist? Patricia didn't want her old title back. Didn't care about the office politics, or the next round of innovation theater Malcolm had cooked up in some overpriced productivity retreat. She wanted this. Clarity. Truth dropped like a hammer, and it was heavy enough to break the table in half. The boardroom had the emotional temperature of a morgue. No one spoke for a full 15 seconds after Leonard dropped the final page of Patricia's folder like a mic at a funeral. Then came the quiet flurry, shifting chairs, throat clears, papers shuffling like scared animals. No one made eye contact with Malcolm. Even the CFO, usually his lapdog in cufflinks, sat back with folded arms and the expression of a man realizing he just co-signed a sinking ship. Leonard adjusted his glasses again. Per Clause 7b, activation of the assumed continuity override triggers a mandatory compliance hold, effective immediately. A pause. What does that mean in practical terms? One board member asked, too afraid to guess. It means, Leonard said flatly, until the oversight structure is reviewed and reset, all discretionary spending is frozen. Vendor payments, marketing initiatives, hiring budgets, corporate travel, a decision not tied to contractually obligated delivery or federal compliance timelines, is suspended. The COO muttered, Jesus Christ. The HR lead glanced down at her phone. Then, is that why our security clearance just failed at the main server facility? I got a ping from the access team during this meeting. Leonard nodded, unbothered. Standard protocol. Clearance permissions are retracted from any unit undergoing internal audit. It's how the clause was designed. Another board member, Reagan something, one of the newer ones, fresh from some venture capital firm with too many vowels in its name, pulled a crumpled sheet from her folder. I flagged this last week. Vendor 48-6A missed their access credential renewal. We thought it was an admin issue, but if this override activated retroactively, she trailed off. The implication hung in the air like mold. Patricia didn't gloat, didn't need to. He just stood there, watching the realization leak into every corner of the room like cold water under a locked door. Malcolm looked like he might vomit into his legal pad. His last page of Phase Roman II acceleration was still showing on the monitor, some dumb graphic about trust loops. The irony could have fed an entire Greek chorus. The CEO finally exhaled. What's the next step? Leonard didn't even blink. Governance must designate a qualified interim continuity officer to guide internal audit cooperation and prevent secondary protocol activation. He turned to Patricia. By legacy record and in the absence of termination, that would be Miss Hill. Silence again. Patricia raised an eyebrow, not high, just enough. I'll need direct access reinstated, she said. Compliance suite. vendor logs, budget override requests, and someone needs to untangle your Slack permissions. Currently, your legal lead is listed as a former intern who's now working in digital sales. The CEO nodded slowly, hands folded like a man who just found religion in a spreadsheet. We'll get that fixed. Patricia, he trailed off. Didn't finish the sentence. Maybe couldn't. She waited one beat, then two. I'll need a direct line to legal and someone from audit who knows the difference between a clause and a clause header, preferably not someone who's also managing the company's Instagram. The HR lead coughed and quickly took a note. Malcolm still hadn't spoken. He looked like a man trying to rewind the last hour of his life with his mind. Patricia didn't even glance at him. As the meeting dissolved into whispered sidebars and quiet reassignments, she walked over to the monitor and clicked off the display. No ceremony, just click. Done. She tucked the folder under her arm, turned to legal's rep and said, I'll see you in the incident room in 20. Bring coffee. Black. Then she left. No applause, no dramatic music. Just a middle-aged woman with a folder and a memory like a bear trap, walking down the hallway while the building scrambled to remember how it used to run before Malcolm turned it into a sandbox for his delusions. She didn't want the crown. She just wanted the brakes to work again. And for once, everyone else finally agreed to get out of her damn way. The hallway outside the boardroom smelled like ozone and panic sweat. People bustled, whispered, avoided each other's eyes like guilt was airborne. Patricia stood at the window, watching a maintenance crew reset the building's badge system. Reset, what a word. Funny how it only sounds harmless when it's not attached to people's lives. Behind her, the door creaked open. The CEO stepped out, slowly. He wasn't sure what gravity was anymore. He didn't look like the man who once thundered across the trading floor during the vendor breach of 2010. He looked like someone who just remembered too late which wire was live. Patricia, he said, not Patty, not Hill. Just her name, clean and cautious. She turned, waiting. He didn't approach. Just stood there, fiddling with his cufflink like it might give him answers. That clause, he said quietly. Section 7B. She nodded. What about it? You didn't write that phrasing. Not exactly. Not just you. Patricia tilted her head. You remember. The CEO stared at the floor. I was holed up in legal during the 2008 continuity scare. We didn't know if we'd survive the week. I scribbled a clause, half out of panic, half from instinct. We never submitted it formally, just kept it as insurance. It wasn't supposed to make it into circulation. Her voice was flat. Left it in the emergency draft packet. Carl filed it under the red folder. I kept the packet updated every year. He looked up slowly, eyes narrowing with a mix of disbelief and shame. You kept the protocols alive. In case of fire, she said. No smugness, just the truth. The CEO exhaled like he'd been holding something for a decade. Malcolm lifted it. He doesn't know what he lifts. He just cuts and pastes confidence on top of consequences. Man gave a sad, crooked smile. He thought it made him look prepared. It made him look plagiarized, she replied. And it made you look forgetful. That landed. He winced, but he didn't argue. Is it salvageable? You'll survive the audit, she said. Barely. But you'll lose 2 vendors, 3 chairs, and the board will insist on a controls overhaul. They'll want blood, but not yours yet. He nodded, then gestured limply toward the boardroom. You consider stepping back into compliance? On paper, Patricia looked past him at the room she'd just saved, the people who'd spent the last 3 months pretending she didn't exist. Her name was still on the emergency contact sheet next to building integrity risk. No, she said softly. Let them build a new compliance system. Just don't let your son near the blueprints. She turned, started walking. Patricia, she paused. Why'd you wait? You could have exposed him earlier. She looked over her shoulder, because the problem wasn't just him. It was everyone who let him. Timing matters. Now they'll remember it. She pushed open the stairwell door, never trusted elevators after the 2012 power surge, and descended like gravity belonged to her. By the time she reached the lobby, her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen. One text. Daniel Price Chairman, Dallin Thorne Partners ready to build something better? She smiled, not the smile of someone who'd won. That would have required an opponent worth beating. This was the smile of someone who finally put the fire out and now had the matchbook to herself. No applause, no plaque, just legacy reclaimed, not inherited, engineered on her terms. Appreciate you sticking around, you wise old rebels. Smash that subscribe button, or this fossil might just cause another epic fiasco.